Unless you've been living under a rock, you've seen some of this art. What does it all have in common? Well, one thing is that it's almost unanimously considered great art, but it's all commercial art. It was produced for clients. I'm making some assumptions that I wasn't born from a pure internal artistic vision. Maybe in some cases it did, but there was someone paying for it, and I can't imagine that that did not affect the art in some way. It kind of goes against an important criterion when I'm trying to figure out, is this art? A lot of this art, if it were produced today, I could see a lot of online commenters screaming, "Sellout." This video is for the people like me who are trying to figure out the balance of work in their lives. The people who spend a lot of time creating for others, but feel like they don't take a lot of time for their own personal creative development. Fret not, because you are in good company. I don't know. Am I good company? I don't know. You're in company. You're in my company. We can share this burden. When we look back in time, art and commerce have always been intertwined, and they still are. I'm going to be using visual arts as the main example, but you can parallel this with a lot of different creative practices. From as far back as thousands of years ago, sculptures were made, generally commissioned by rulers, maybe as a proxy for themselves to be worshipped as a god. But the artists who created these artifacts are completely forgotten. Throughout this time, and even up to the Renaissance, art was considered a trade, something you were raised up in. The artifact itself was of great importance, but it sort of seemed almost like the artists themselves were interchangeable. When the Renaissance came along, it was the first time when artists as brands started to emerge. You had Michelangelo, you had Raphael, and you had the rest of the Ninja Turtles. Their patrons were quite often the oldest corporation in the world, the Catholic Church. When we think of these artists, we think of the Sistine Chapel ceiling, we think of Michelangelo's David, you think of Da Vinci's Last Supper. The article I showed a second ago frames the Renaissance painters as artists of genius. Not genius in the sense that we use the word today, but in the sense that they were creating from a deeper part within themselves, their spirit. And even though these Renaissance artists were creating from a deeper place, they still came up through an establishment, and their main patrons were mostly the church and rich people and that sort of thing. It wasn't until the 1800s that the realists and the impressionists started to create art from within, whether or not they had a patron. Along with the poets of the era, these artists gave us the modern idea of the starving artist, people who would create above anything else in their lives. They didn't need people to tell them what to paint. Van Gogh's apocryphal story says that he only sold one painting during his lifetime. It didn't stop him from painting. On a side note, if you have a chance to go to Amsterdam and visit the Van Gogh Museum, it's a very cheesy tourist checklist thing to do, but do it and spend time with the exhibition. I found it incredibly moving. I had to push myself through a sea of people who were there to collect something to do with a Pokemon Van Gogh collaboration, which kind of broke my heart a little bit, but I got over it, and I like to think maybe one of those people actually looked at the art and it changed them. With the Impressionists, commercial work and patronage were still commonplace. Toulouse-Lautrec was a prolific poster artist creating ads while doing progressive, beautiful work in the brothels of Paris, the Lord's work. Salvador Dali created some of the most memorable surrealist art of the 1900s, but you could argue his most well-known creation, at least to an unwitting public, was the Chupa Chups logo. Andy Warhol, Keith Haring, all dabbled in commercial art. I don't want to get caught up in art history. I want to talk about being a commercial artist today. This is where I've found some clarity in the past couple years. It's okay to be a commercial artist, but you gotta be careful. If you're a polite little Christian farm boy like I was, if you're a good student who wants to improve their technical skills and knowledge, if you understand marketing strategy and know how to help clients craft their messages, they will offer you money, and if you're like me, you will say yes. But then 10 years go by and you feel like you never really developed. You hear the little echo of a voice inside that you listen to in fits and spurts and start to develop something, and then someone says, oh, I like that, come on over here and work with us. Then another 5 years go by and you start to feel a little uneasy, maybe a little pain that there's a whole other being inside who maybe hasn't been fully exercised since you were a kid. And now, as a fully grown and mature adult, you've not only neglected that whole other person, you've buried it in mortgages and responsibilities and the idea of how an adult should act, and maybe a whole lot of shame. Maybe I'm losing you here, but in our little art history lesson, we've seen artist as tradesperson, artist as extension of the establishment, and artist as an individual creating from within. I was stuck for 20 years in that middle group, creating for the establishment, barely out of the Middle Ages. My commercial work was informing itself and creating sort of, for lack of a better term, incestuous feedback loop that wasn't very healthy. If I illustrate my career, I have this sort of center stem rooted in who I am, and people would come along and say, that's cool, we'll pay you to do something like that. And it's so tough to get back. You're stuck on a detour, a branch. If we dive back into people who I consider artists who do commercial work, let's look around contemporary film. Wes Anderson has directed lots of commercials. David Fincher has created lots of commercials. Sofia Coppola, Spike Jonze. I consider these folks artists who have also done commercial work. Think of that distinction, artists who have done commercial work. Think back to that tree analogy. They're growing tall and straight as artists. Will they do a commercial? Sure. Will they make money? Sure. But the difference between these people and me are that they're artists first. David Fincher was asked to direct commercials because he was a great director first. And they can make a lot of money doing it because the agencies and clients look at their work and say, we want that. And those directors are excited. They can get their team involved. They can play with equipment they wouldn't normally have the budget for and get a little exercise. Their little branches are short and beneficial to them. Money, experience, exercise, but they don't neglect their path. So a part of my current revolution in my life is putting energy back into that main stem. It's to not cringe at the idea of calling myself an artist, and instead of being a commercial artist, being an artist who does commercial work. And this detaches the idea of your main stem has to be linked to your income. Maybe these little shoots are you going to your day job every day and knowing and excited that your true vocation is what you do after hours. It's okay to be a commercial artist, but be an artist first. Create a practice that fuels you and makes clients look at you and say, we want that. It's great to feel that leverage in your hands. I've made myself my biggest client, whether it's my photography practice, my directing practice, what I'm doing here on YouTube, feeling entitled to chase it. I think it's important to think of yourself as the artist, the creative person, the creator, the tuba maestro, the knitting master that you've always cringed at the idea of calling yourself. Put those things first. Embrace them. The starving artists of the 1800s found a path to viewership outside the existing establishment, paving the way for us, like literally us in this time, to be individual artists, to call ourselves individual creators, to live on our own terms. And I find it hard to argue against the idea that there's never been a better time when we have access to the whole world, when platforms exist so you can find your audience. My younger self is so jealous of YouTube existing, of the tools being so cheap. I remember it being so hard to find a VCR that I could just pause recording and add edits when I was making videos. The idea of adding a title to a video was just mind-blowingly difficult and took expensive hardware. We have everything we need. The only thing you or I need is to look inside, to grab a pickaxe and start digging.
Do you want me to stop it?